Welcome everybody to the Vulnerability Management Experience. In Act 1, we're going to cover what are vulnerabilities. So by definition, a vulnerability is a hole or a weakness in the application, which can be a design flaw or an implementation bug that allows an attacker to cause harm to the stakeholders of an application. Also, the stakeholders should include the application owner, application users, and other entities that rely on the application. The term vulnerability is often used very loosely. By that saying, guys, I would say a lot of my constituents will actually use the word vulnerability when it comes down to actual threats or if it comes down to exploits. Now, know the difference. A vulnerability, as it's seen, is a weakness or a hole. A threat is a potential risk to a system. And also an exploit it's a virus that's already taken place. Basically, it exploited a weakness in a system. So it exploited the vulnerability in a system. So just make sure you guys got to just be clear on when distinguishing the three. Types of vulnerabilities. So let's go ahead and look at the API. An API is a contract between a caller and a callee. The most common forms of API abuse are caused by the caller, failing to honor its end of the contract. For example, if the program fails to call Chai Direct after calling, say, Chai Root, it violates the contract that specifies how to change the active root directory in a secure fashion. Another good example of a library abuse is expecting the callee to return trustworthy DNS information to the caller, or basically domain name server information to the caller. So let's use an example as far as a real world type of example. Let's say if you guys have a contract, let's say with a cell phone provider, and in that contract, you're actually binded to pay your bill monthly. Now, if it gets to the point where you guys stop paying your bill, that becomes where you would start failing your honor. You're failing to honor that contract, in which you're starting to breach that contract, in which there will actually be other issues that may come forward with that, as far as you go into collections, and it would get real nasty. So in this particular issue right here, as far as with the API, by that information is actually being failed to be honored, there's pretty, some bad things that can actually happen, in which you see here on the slide. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Least privilege vulnerability. The elevated privilege level required to perform operations such as Chai Root should be dropped immediately after the operation is performed. So as far as with least privilege, that would actually be put in place. Let's say if we have someone that's on contract, or you have a consultant that comes in and performs work. So if they perform work on a very short contract, for instance, if you have someone that comes in to actually tune or update your firewall or your proxy for that instance, and they're on contract for 1 week, that's the only thing they're going to have access to is that actual piece of software. Now, once their last day is up, immediately their access is revoked. Also, they're not going to have any access to anything else within that environment at all. So if they need to cross-check any information or basically cross-check the functionality, they would actually have to get in contact with those respective teams. So let's go ahead and continue on. When a program calls a privileged function, such as Chai Root, it must first acquire root privilege. As soon as a privilege operation is completed, the program should drop root privilege and return to the privilege level of the invoking user. So again, guys, like I was speaking on not too long ago, that actually deals with access privilege being granted for a very limited amount of time, and only to a specific piece of software, or basically a specific piece of equipment in that given time frame.